love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game. Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a beautiful Wednesday morning, and that means it is time for the Wednesday morning edition of The Hello Show. And you're all going to learn all kinds of really, really, really cool stuff. I know some of you are hungover, and some of you are professional. No, I got nothing else. I'm actually going to let this go ahead. It is my great pleasure today to introduce your Wednesday morning host, Mr. Mark Isitt.
Thank you. You don't really know what you're applauding for yet, so you shouldn't be. Hello is the name of the show. I'm not saying hello to you, it's the name of the show. So every time you hear hello today, it won't be me saying hello, just me saying the name of the show. And it's a nice and snappy title, right? Because it's a show which is all about meeting each other, about organizing the office so it becomes a successful office, more profitable, of course, healthier, more sociable. You can network in the office in a better fashion. So the hello title is a good one, but the subtitle, the anatomy of organizations. Has anyone got a clue what that might mean? Yeah? Good? Good, because I don't, but I'll probably find out during the day today. But it's a bit of a strained title, is my impression. I don't know. This is Indy, by the way. Indy is the organ player that we will have here every day.
Every day. Lucky you.
And he's even called Indy the organ slayer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What is the anatomy of organization, Indy? Because you're American, you're a very knowledgeable person, so you should know.
What is the anatomy of an organization or organizations?
Organizations, yeah.
It is the anatomy of organizations.
You anatomize
the
organizations.
You have guests to answer this. I'm just going to play music.
You're absolutely right. We're going to bring in the guests. Please welcome them up on stage. You were there, right? And since this is a little chat about jobs and working places, I thought that I'd kind of make this into a job application scenario. So I'll ask you four questions, very short questions, and I want very short answers. And I'll start over here. Name?
Ferda Kolatan.
Nationality?
Turkish.
Title?
Architect.
Now, if you were an animal, what type of animal would you be?
I would be a flying lizard.
Flying lizard. Name?
Susanna Toivanen.
Nationality?
Finnish, but 2 passports. Finnish and Swedish.
Title?
Sociologist.
What do you see in your rear view mirror?
Well, I see work environments getting better. I see poor working environments and possibilities to make them better.
Name?
Johanna Olsen.
Yeah. Nationality?
Swedish, pseudo-Australian.
Title?
Architect, designer, brand developer.
What adjectives would your references use to describe you?
Organized, creative, forward-thinking.
Name?
Oscar Hafvenstein.
Nationality?
Swedish.
Title?
Hard question. I used to be an architect probably, but hard to answer these days, I would say.
The people you have not chosen to include as references, what adjectives would they use to describe you?
Probably too theoretical, professory. I don't know.
Name?
Burkhard Remmers,
Nationality?
German and Bavarian.
Title?
International Communication, Corporate Development.
How fast can you type?
15 times in 1 hour.
That's not very fast.
No, but it follows the speed of my ideas.
No, but seriously, on the matter of typing, that is a thing of the past, it seems, right? And the office today is not this where you have to go because of all the papers that are there, all the books are there, so you really need to be there. You can actually do all the job from home, it seems to me. So why does the office still exist?
We still have to type. Writing skills are very important.
That's
Yeah, you have dictaphone, you can just speak and it will be written automatically.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you... The main challenges for or changes for office buildings are today it's not to support the individual work because that's you're enabled to do it wherever you are as long as you have access to your data. But on the other side, we need more coordination, more cooperation. As stronger you have the specialization, as more you have to coordinate. Otherwise, you have a lot of puzzle elements, but they won't match, they won't fit. And that's why office buildings have to create community to enable people to exchange ideas. And this part of office work is much more important than to do your individual work, because that's sometimes much better to do it anywhere else but not in the office. To have your concentration and your privacy you need to be when you are alone.
I agree. I think to me the organizational aspects of how to run an office, architecture in my case, can be completely decentralized at this point. There's no doubt about it. You can manage it from home, you can manage it with collaborators all over the world. But I think there's something that you get from an office environment which has to do with energy, which cannot be, at this point at least, in my opinion, gotten from virtual Skype meetings and those kinds of things. So I think it's more a social, maybe even an emotional condition of being together with people, rather than an organizational problem like, let's say, the 1950s idea of office spaces in the United States is very, very much structured towards optimization and efficiency. And I think we've really moved away from that towards something that is much more organic. Well, efficiency is a tricky word. I don't want to get into that because that will be professorial too much. But I do think the core energy of being around in a space like this with people, rather than seeing them on the screen, is still something we cannot so easily, for the creative process, do without.
I mean, we don't probably know how to create this kind of proximities yet, I would say. I think that's a kind of tricky things for us to explore further on, because
these crossbreeding facilities, you mean, that they are difficult to design? Because
people still want their sense of security. They need a lot of really rooted or basic human stuff that you can't take away. People get rootless and choose some other space to go to.
I think so too, because our brains have been the same for millions of years. I mean, even if we can type today with using all kind of gadgets and in all kind of places, but we are still human beings. We are social creators, and we need to meet. And we definitely need offices that are designed to support good meetings. And good teams.
It's also the question of identity, because we are instinctively territorial oriented. We need territorial placeholders for the roles in our community. So we need to be oriented by space. There had been the idea in the 90s that everyone will have strange glasses, 3D, and will navigate in the virtual
space. Reality.
And never before we had so many personal meetings like today, because you can replace a certain part of your meetings where it's just to make sure we talk about the same things. That's perfectly made by video conferencing or even more sophisticated technologies like interactables or something like that. But the interaction is very complex between humans. And emotions like trust, confidence, that's not possible to create it virtually. So we need all dimensions of our senses. That's why we have to meet. That's why we can't do that hello show in the internet only. So it's a completely...
Yeah, it's like Susanna was saying, it's, in human nature to meet in groups and to interact with other human beings. Like when we're isolated, we're only ourselves, and we don't work so well that way.
The ideas of space organization and space planning are still from the 19th century. And the idea is that humans are like machines, and you adapt the environment to the objectives, to the humans as objects. And today, the creative power make human subjects, individuals. So we have to think from humans who are in the building to make them feel good and motivated and happy. That's completely different. Efficiency is so crazy. I had something on the website discovered from our industry. A company said, now we have a program to reduce the time you spend on walking to the spaces. So we have a potential of productivity, efficiency about 30%. And you can evaluate it with euros. But in fact, it's reducing quality. It's reducing the needs of our biological systems to move, to be active, to be involved.
I think
so. It's contradictory.
Yeah, I think you just said a key word. The sort of, you said organic or biological way of thinking. And what I realize is the whole model of efficiency is basically coming from kind of the modernist principles, which did start in the 18th century. I mean like old modernism in terms of industrialization, etc. And then it has its peak, obviously, in the 1920s, 30s, Bauhaus, the Style, all those kinds of movements, which at least ethically would make an argument to say it's all about efficiency. Of course, if you look deeply, it's not. It's a lot about aesthetics, about philosophy, about politics, all of that. But the ethic of argument was to say, well, we make things better through efficiency. We don't need ornament because it's an add-on. We want it to be white and flat, and we need everything to be sort of spurning our way of production. And I do think, at least in the last 15, 20 years very strongly, maybe starting in the 60s, the movement goes away from that. That efficiency is not necessarily what makes us creative at all. But it's more about how we begin to understand the problem as a problem rather than a template which we can go through a certain set of motions categorically in order to come to a solution. And that, of course, has spatial implications in the way how an office is organized. It has implications how you think about your own work, how you collaborate with people. It's massive. I mean, it's basically a paradigm shift from a logic of machine to a logic of nature. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it.
And I would also say that, also hooking on the efficiency, that I mean, if we could measure the efficiency of creativity or people working together in a good way, I would speculate actually that we are on a 30% kind of efficiency or 70 or 80% inefficiency in today's workspace and today's companies and everything like that. Because the shift from, I'm using a theoretical base or a logic called service dominant logic that uses, instead of industrialization, talk about goods dominant logic. We believe that we do goods, that we do stuff when we actually do service. We help people, we use our competence to help others do stuff all the time. And if that could be measured, which is kind of tricky, I would say we are on a 20-30% level of achievement only.
It's just, that's the tricky thing, isn't it? That you can't, as long as you can measure something, it's worth something, it seems.
Well, yeah, I think we are focusing too much on this measuring aspect and being effective and being productive and all this. I think in modern working life and to have an office or a work environment that supports the results of your work. I mean, what kind of company you are running, I mean, the results are important in terms of if your customers are happy what you are doing. So I think the focus is more on results. And I mean, if you can produce better work somewhere else than at your office, then that's good. I mean, still, when you look at how we organize our work, we have the technology gives us so many possibilities to do work wherever, but still the way of organizing work is very much on the control aspects. We have a boss that wants us to be at the office, because when we are at the desk, then we are working. But I mean, if we shift the focus from control to results and think in those terms, I think that also contributes to better work environments and workplaces.
What do you say, Johanna, to this?
I was going to say it's very interesting when you look at the office as a building and a gathering of spaces that are supposed to support what you do in the office. When I've worked in Australia, and there's a term called bump, which is not the spaces that are created for working, but it's the spaces that you interact with people, like corridors and spaces that are just sort of places where you bump into people. And it's proven that that's where you actually do your most creative work, as in you meet people that you wouldn't normally meet, and you have conversations, or you think of things, have ideas that just originate from those areas, which is very interesting. So it's not always to do with...
Is it very much in the unexpected meetings the creativity comes from?
Yeah, it's a communication by opportunity, by incident. And it's a question how can you provoke people to meet, and how can you motivate them to stay for a while and to start to chat and to exchange ideas. Maybe I have an explanation for your anatomy of organization.
Yeah,
it's
good.
The anatomy of knowledge. Because that's really interesting. Knowledge is a very big topic in every company.
Or even anatomy of knowledge sharing. Maybe knowledge sharing would be even further on.
Yeah.
Through people interaction.
Knowledge management. Or most people understand database, but in fact, database is information, and the knowledge is in the heads of people. It's your experience. You are not able to make all your experience to an information to document your experience. It's not possible.
But it's also through how that human interaction brings out that specific piece of knowledge.
Yeah.
And what you do with it at that time.
And in fact, it's a question, a challenge for space planning to say how to enable people to meet and how to motivate them to go for a certain space and to stay for a while and to be open enough and trustful to exchange your ideas.
But how do you do that then? How do you create that kind of working environment?
From my research perspective, there are some tools for organizations. I mean, there are aspects on the organizational level that are very clearly connected with the health of the employees, for instance, measured as level of sickness absence. And two very important aspects are leadership, very clear leadership that focuses on social skills more than just do this and do that. So, I mean, this kind of leadership based on social skills is very important in future working life when we are working in teams that maybe don't meet in the same physical virtual teams. So leadership is important, and also, as you mentioned, communication. And communication also that formal communication in a company, for instance, but also very informal communication, which happens when we meet people that we didn't know before, and that gives inspiration. So two very practical tools for any organization that wants to become supportive for employees' health and productivity or creativity or whatever you want to call it. It's leadership and communication.
So
simple.
It doesn't have anything to do with new technique and new gadgets?
Well, actually it does, because I mean the workplace gets more virtual. We have the possibilities, and also the teams. I mean, your colleagues maybe work in Los Angeles, and you're a leader of a team that is spread all over the world. Of course, that is a big challenge for you as a leader. So leadership, how do you lead a team that is spread all around the world?
Also, I think it's difficult to come up, again, it seems we're almost looking for another formula, which I think is exactly precisely the problem. of what we critique when we look back to modernist principles of organization. I don't think it's about a formula. And I don't think it's about exclusivity either, saying like, well, it works only this way, only that way. It's very clear that we live in a virtual world. It's not with goggles, thank God. I do remember those times when we thought we were just running around with data gloves. Right? It's not like that. It turned into the internet, much more powerful than any glove could be. It's not going to go away. It's going to accelerate. We will integrate it more and more. I mean, I have my younger cousins, they all completely communicate via Facebook. So these things are here to stay. They will accelerate, and they will be and they will be more increasingly part of how we organize workspace. But spatiality is also here to stay. It's not going to go away. It's not like, I remember the argument when DVDs or video came to the market, it would kill the movie theaters.
Yeah, exactly.
It did not. Actually, it enhanced people numbers to go to the movies. So it was more kind of an ecology of mutual dependencies. And I think this is exactly what we have here too. I mean, it's kind of about the ecology of how the virtual, the spatial, the functional, the efficient, the creative come together. That's what's changing. And we cannot really come up with a formula and say, because it is in the process of change. So the moment we think we capture it, it will be someplace else. To me, it's a lot about leaving some room to understand how to actually adjust as we go. Right? So not to have fixed hierarchies, but you mentioned the notion of a leader, and that's interesting in today's world as well. I do think there's still top-down priorities. Not everything is bottom-up and networked. It's, again, a combination of both in order to be productive.
Yeah, it's part of our genetic code that we are social beings, so we need hierarchies as well. We need leadership.
And I mean, if you want to be concrete, if you want to give organizations some tools, from the research we know this, that leadership and communication are very important tools that affect the well-being of the employees. So I mean, that's a good starting point then, that our world is changing, and also our working world is changing.
And I would say that one thing, kind of story that we use is that, in the 70s, Steve Jobs and all these guys were sitting in the garages in the basements and trying to figure out what can be done with computers.
Yes.
I'm trying to live in the kind of metaphor that we are sitting in our garage right now, trying to understand what we can do with people now when we have computers. That we kind of give some space and openness to really explore, because as I try to say all the time, I think we're not there yet.
No.
But I think you can look at it on a much simpler level as well. There's something called the Blue Zone Study, which is a study of human beings in the world, and there's some places in the world called the Blue Zones where they live the longest and they seem to be the happiest. And one of the top things that they come back to is one of the reasons is purpose in life, as in working life. And if you don't have purpose, then you're never going to achieve anything as a working human being. And I think that has to be something that you look at when you design these spaces, and give people leadership that's giving you purpose, but also seeing every individual as what they are and bringing out what they do best.
And how important is the office, would you say, Johanna, from an interior design perspective? How important is it that it's attractive, that I mean, I get the impression that people tend to move from working place to working place much more today than they used to.
Absolutely. It's very important. I mean, it's a way of, if you say looking at 5 different jobs and you got 5 different offices, and you're going to look at the more attractive offices before you accept that employment.
And what about the branding aspect?
Very important, because it's the company identity, and that's how you can feel like you are part of a company, if you can perceive the brand and the strength of the brand.
But that's an interesting point, because we have a more individualization. We say people are subjects and are no more objects in the work environment. So they want to individualize the environment. And on the other side, you have the team and the group and the organization, and you have the brand. And how to balance that? That is a huge challenge.
Yes.
To say, maybe you give an offer to select something so that people feel sovereign, they can decide about their environment. But it's a lot of struggling with new ideas of sustainability. You have this automatic lighting by movements. Yeah, you can't open the windows because you will waste energy. You are in an environment you have no chance to influence anything. So that's on the ecological side, it's good, but in the whole aspects, I think it's reducing physical well-being and feeling as a subject who really can change something in the environment. And that's the feeling you need as well for the office forms. The open space, it's not a receipt for all.
But I think one important thing that you mentioned is that the purpose and the meaningfulness. I mean, also that the working place, the aesthetics of the working place, that it's beautiful and the colors are right. This is very important, of course, but it's not enough. I mean, if we don't have the psychosocial factors in place, I mean, the work doesn't become purposeful. We don't find the purpose and meaningfulness.
It has to be
that.
more than skin deep.
Exactly.
But normally companies who have no sensibilities for that, they won't express enrichment in the environment. So that in that case, it's again a link, because you can see how an organization will tick if you see how they value the environment as well. Otherwise, they won't spend any money in that. No. So if that's not worse for them, they won't do it. And I think really it's a huge change of paradigm for this idea being objects or subjects. And the idea of ergonomics, for example, we are still on the 19th century. The reductions, the adaptation of the environment to human, at the end we'll die. Because life is stimulus and a reaction. If you have no stimulus, you won't react, you won't live anymore. It's crazy.
One funny thing that happens when you talk about subjects, we're still in the shift towards understanding people as subjects, of course. What happens with our professions, the architects and the designers, because we come from, I mean, we're trained in the 19th century or 20th century thinking, and I mean, why we choose pink or orange or white, I mean, that's not kind of subjectization. I mean, in the spirit of self-management and self-organizing and trying to get your own working place optimized for your own way of working, that would create environments that, I mean, look more like Facebook or Google offices, which are, I mean, look like a mess maybe from an architect perspective, but that's meant for them, and they choose their own style and the stuff. And I think that the complete fair here has some challenges in the future when people say, I want my own space to be in my own way to feel healthy or to feel good and work well. So I think
what does your office look like, Oscar?
It looks like from the 70s. It's a lot of greeneries, plants, a lot of plants.
Okay. I thought architects hated plants.
No, we love plants.
Oh, we love plants. We love plants.
But your architecture looks like a plant, doesn't it? Usually,
yeah, exactly.
Very organic.
But yes, you know, I think what's interesting about this is it cannot be denied that a lot of offices, also like, you know, creative people offices, architects offices, etc., are in the end open spaces where people sort of organize their desks in one way or the other. I mean, it seems at some point you also have to ask the question, well, can you over-design something? Can you over-stimulate through the environment rather than actually leaving it neutral to a certain level where you can begin to stimulate yourself in different ways? My office, for instance, is an open loft with a bunch of chairs and desks.
A loft on Manhattan?
Yes.
Lovely.
Actually in Brooklyn.
Okay.
In Brooklyn, not Manhattan. We just moved. And so on the one hand, a lot of people come to my office and then they say, well, you know, it seems not designed. And that's precisely the point. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you, particularly from an architect standpoint, it feeds back to the notion of also leaving flexibility and openness to a certain degree, because that's when interaction can happen. And I think it's a very interesting balance between stimulating through your environment, spatially, materially, color, all those things, but then also leaving openness rather than, you know, closing it down and making it too specific. Right? I think we were talking earlier on about the notion of customization versus modernization. And I think that's another important aspect within this debate or discussion, I guess, which is to say that in the same way where I see we have a paradigmatic shift going from a machine to what I call the organic or nature, I also feel that by the same token we're going away from models or templates that make us look for continuity towards ones that actually also have unpredictability built into them, right? So customizability to me comes with that notion. You have to be able to adapt quickly, not only in your work, but also in your daily life. And I think that, to me at least, is a very, very important quality of my own office environment.
How have you structured your office in order to do that?
My office is small, but I like to think of it really large in terms of collaborations that we set up. We have, for instance, people we work with in terms of fabrication that sit in a different city. They moved from New York to Kentucky in order to rent a bigger space, and they can do that because they do not lose their clients anymore because of proximity, because we can now deal through software communication with the process of making in a much more controlled way. So I don't have to fly to Kentucky twice a week. I can actually control it through the way how I use technology. So it's a decentralized process with a core element that we need in order to have people around and have a space and be an architect's office, right?
Do you think the result of all the new technology will be that offices become a bit smaller, that they contract?
Not in numbers, but in terms of putting all the numbers into one location, I think that's already happening. I think, at least in the architecture world, without a doubt, you have either very large corporate offices with a lot of offices all over the world, and then headquarters usually, or you have small offices like ours, where you have to rely on a larger network anyway in order to get anything done. Since we are in a phase of globalization, you cannot compete just within your own neighborhood anymore. So you need to find a way, even as a very, very small office, to have a large impact. And that forces you definitely to go beyond the borders of your own country, language, and so forth.
Good. What about the chair? Very short explanation, and then we'll end this show.
Natural approach or biological approaches. Now everybody knows that our performance is really interrelated with our movements. So the idea sitting still because otherwise you can't be concentrated. It's just a myth. It's not true. It's wrong. So we can't force companies that people have not to work 8 hours in front of a computer. And that's a problem that our desk is now really small like this, and the movements we do is just moving our fingers. Though the question is, how can I motivate people, even in that phases, in that situation, to move more? And that was the idea of dynamic seating since 30 years. But if you look to this kind of dynamic, then people would walk like that. Yeah? You are able to move like that, and that's like ergonomics is still shown in these brochures and Bibles of ergonomics, that from the profile you see like that, sitting in that posture, certain angles. If you imagine to work 8 hours like that, you probably have an idea how to get sick. So the idea was, why can we walk? Why we are how we are? And we can turn our hips, we can move independently our thighs. So we just said, why not implement these movements into a chair? Just to stimulate the hips, the joints we have, and the way they want to work. And to sit not in the right posture, but just much more with attention, respect, and discipline, but nothing with health. But to enable you to sit how you want.
Well, that looks totally sloppy, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's fine. You're not my boss. When my boss will pass, I will sit like that. And you can really start belly dancing with this chair. So it's a little step. but it's you have to make a reset.
It's a 5-year research and 35. What was it?
3.5.
3.5 million euros in research cost. How many chairs do you have to sell in order to break even?
A couple of 100,000.
And
that'll be actually a final word, because otherwise, oops, we've run over time already. Thank you very, very much, Ferda, Sanna, Johanna, Oskar, Burkhard. Thank you very much for coming and for sharing all this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game. Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game.